Good day, everyone. I am Mary Grace of Gelbolingo, and for today's topic, I will be discussing ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. But before diving into our main topic, allow me to present to you the topic outline of our discussion. First is the definition of ethnocentrism. Second, the view of William G. Sumner about ethnocentrism. Third, the definition of cultural relativism. And fourth is the view of Franz Boas about cultural relativism, which was later on popularized by students in the 20th century. Now, let us know what is ethnocentrism. So, ethnocentrism is the act of judging other cultures based on standards and customs of one's own culture. That means it involves looking at another culture from the perspective of one's culture. So let us take this as our example. A Westerner might find East Asians' habit of eating with chopsticks a silly practice. Similarly, some people may also show reluctance to eat the food of another culture. So we can see from here that ethnocentrism stems from the notion that one's own culture is far superior to others. So, the ethnocentric individuals judge other groups relative to their own ethnic group or culture, especially with concern for the language, the behavior, the customs, and the beliefs of religion. So, they usually believe that his culture is better, correct, and normal. In other words, an ethnocentric assesses another culture from the standards of his own culture. So he is plainly concerned with the similarities between his culture and others. So if the beliefs and customs of another culture are different from his culture, then he'll feel that culture is barbaric or savage. So this usually happens because an ethnocentric person feels that his or her culture is the correct or normal way of living. Finally, these ethnic distinctions and subdivisions serve to define each ethnicity's unique cultural identity. Now let us know the view of William G. Sumner about ethnocentrism and the view in the study of anthropology. So, according to William G. Sumner, ethnocentrism is defined as the technical name for the view of things in which one's own group is the center of everything, and all others are scaled and rated with reference to it. So he further characterized it as often leading to pride, vanity, beliefs of one's own group superiority, and contempt of outsiders. So moving on, we have the word ethnocentric. So in the study of anthropology, being ethnocentric means thinking that your own culture is better than another culture. So the people born into a particular culture that grow up absorbing the values and behaviors of the culture, so it will develop a worldview that considers their culture to be the norm. So if people then experience another cultures that have different values and normal behaviors, then they will find that the thought patterns appropriate for their birth culture are not appropriate for the new cultures. However, since people are accustomed to their birth culture, it can be difficult for them to see the behaviors of people from a different culture, from the viewpoint of the culture rather than from their own. A very best example of ethnocentrism include religious-centric, which claims a divine association like divine nation, one nation under God, God's own country, God's chosen people, and God's promised land. Now, moving on, let us know what is cultural relativism. So, a cultural relativism is the notion that cultural norms and values derive their meaning within a specific social context. So, according to this postulate, values, beliefs, practices, and behaviors of specific social contexts. So, and they should not be judged against the criteria of another culture. This is based on the concept that no culture is better or superior to another. So they involve looking at another culture from its own perspective instead of one's own culture. A person who believes in cultural relativism understands that one culture is not better than another. In simpler terms, it is the principle that the individual's person's beliefs and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. Now, this view of cultural relativism was established and as accepted in anthropological research by Franz Boas in the first few decades of the 20th century, which was later popularized by his students. So this idea that all people have equally developed cultures. So this cultural relativism was in part a response to Western ethnocentrism, wherein the ethnocentrism may take obvious forms in which one consciously believes that one's people's arts are the most beautiful, values the most virtuous, and believes the most truthful. Moreover, Boas first articulated the idea in 1887, wherein he says civilization is not something absolute, but it is relative, and our ideas and conceptions are true only so far as our civilization goes. However, Boas did not coin the term. So basically, Franz Boas originally trained in physics and geography, wherein he argued that one's culture may be jade and thus limit one's perceptions in less obvious ways. He understood culture to include not only certain taste in food, art, and music or beliefs about religion. He assumed a much broader notion of culture, wherein he defined culture as the totality of the mental and physical reactions and activities that characterize the behavior of the individuals composing a social group collectively and individually in relation to their natural environment, to other groups, to members of the group itself, and of each individual to himself. So, this understanding of culture confronts anthropologists with two problems. So, the two problems are the following. First is how to escape the unconscious bonds of one's own culture, which inevitably bias our perceptions of and reactions to the world. And the second problem is how to make sense of an unfamiliar culture. So, finally, the generalization of this topic goes with ethnocentrism is the tendency to assume that one's own culture and way of life represent the norm or are superior to all others, while cultural relativism is the viewing of people's behavior from the perspective of their own culture. In conclusion, ethnocentrism is judging other cultures based on the preconceptions originating in the standards and customs of one's own culture. In contrast, cultural relativism is the notion that a culture should be understood in its own terms, not using standards of another culture. So, thank you so much for listening, everyone. And whenever you've got some questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and you are feel free to drop it in the comment section below. Thank you so much once again for listening, and have a great day, everyone. Stay safe and bye.